Happy Monday. Welcome to the show. This is Mile High Sports. I'm Sean Drotar. Sandy Clough is off today. Big week coming up in Denver sports. The Denver Broncos will get things closer to the season going underway. The rookies are in camp over at Dove Valley right now. The veterans will join later this week as the Broncos have a pivotal year. Pivotal, not so much that they'll have a chance to win the Super Bowl, but more the idea that they'll look to get their program back on track. We'll talk more about Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos in just a little bit, but we'll start with the Denver Nuggets. Obviously, for the Denver Nuggets, the offseason has been tumultuous. They lose Kentavious Caldwell-Pope to free agency. They allow him to depart. He heads to the Orlando Magic for a number in which the Nuggets could have been made at least an argument that they should have supported and gotten on board with, but it would have brought them into the second apron of the luxury tax. That's complicated. We've broken that down on the program before and let you know why that's not necessarily the best idea for the Nuggets, because it limits all the things that you can do trying to improve your team going forward. But it also means the Nuggets had to internally replace Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. The plan is to do that with Christian Braun. But now augmenting it becomes interesting. Russell Westbrook, 35 years old, of course, future Hall of Famer in waiting, and the all-time leader in triple-doubles with 199. Nikola Jokic, by the way, is in fourth and should pass number 3. This is real. Magic Johnson later in the season. That's the level you're talking that Nikola Jokic is at this point. But the idea is that the Westbrook might find a way to prop this team back up. Now, it's not done yet. After being dealt from the Clippers to the Jazz in a deal that brought them Chris Dunn, the Jazz are expected to find a buyout with Westbrook, who opted into his player option. And then if that's the case, he would find his way to the Denver Nuggets. The Nuggets have had an interesting summer league. Obviously, in the very first game, DeRon Holmes ends up getting hurt. He tears the Achilles and will miss the entire season. That's a major, major blow. Holmes is Conference Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, was expected to play probably significant minutes at both 4 and 5, and now he's out. That's going to be hard for the Nuggets to replace, and it is strange to look at a team that won the title just a couple seasons ago and say, well, what's the concern? Because you're talking about a young guy, but the problem is with the way the cap works now, you have a few high-dollar guys, then you have to go young and you have to go comparatively cheap. So Holmes' loss is big. In fact, quite frankly, Nuggets fans, I understand there's the entire season to go. Things can happen left and right. I'm not going to sit here and predict, but it wouldn't be shocking at the end of the year to find out that Holmes' injury might have been one of the things that sunk the Nuggets' chances of winning the title this year, because they do need more big men. They do need more defensive help. They do need rim protection, and they need someone to spell Nikola Jokic. Russell Westbrook will not do that. They brought in Dario Saric, who defensively is a minus player, not a good one, but I like the addition. Sarge is interesting too, but the size won't be helped. The Nuggets, however, have more concerns. We talked about prior to the draft, size being the biggest one. Holmes was a great fit for the Nuggets there, but he's out. They need a couple other things as well. They need scoring, and they need another ball handler off of Jamal Murray. Now, scoring, perhaps, maybe that's interesting. Julian Strawther in his limited time looked very good, as did Trey Alexander, the player that the Nuggets signed after the draft from Creighton and signed him into a two-way deal. Alexander, obviously a very interesting player, 6'5", a combo guard with a 6'10" wingspan, can shoot a little bit, has the ability to maybe make things very interesting when we get to the fall. You start seeing what the Nuggets do when they get into camp. So we'll find out more about that. But it's Westbrook that we're going to focus on right off the bat. Jamal Murray has obviously had dealt with injury issues of late over the last couple of years. The consistency in which he has appeared in games and the consistency in which he's missed games has been trending in the wrong direction for the last couple of seasons. Now, Westbrook at 35, you're thinking probably isn't going to solve that all that much. But the truth of the matter is, even though some of his game has dropped off, some of his game is not. And one of those is energy. This is a guy that can still bring you an awful lot of energy off the bench. He can bring it to you even as a spot starter if necessary. We're talking about a guy that has consistently put up big-time energy at big-time times in his career. With the Clippers, he was miscast, especially after they added James Harden, but things got better as the season went along. Westbrook finished with 11.1 points per game, 5 rebounds per game, 4.5 assists per game, but a career low, only 22.5 minutes per game on the court. That part is intriguing because with Christian Brown presumably set to become the starting two guard, what does that mean for Westbrook? Can Russell Westbrook accept being a backup? Being a backup to James Harden is one thing. Being a backup to Christian Brown is another. Presuming all of this happens, and it hasn't happened yet, but the expectations are that they will. This is going to be part of the equation for when it comes to adding Russell Westbrook. He's obviously still a talented player, and he has the ability to do impressive things. But the fit can be convoluted. The shot hasn't fallen for a long time. He hasn't hit 50% of his shots when you're talking about at least any volume shooting for a few years. The jump shot is not much of a concern. When you're not a threat as a jump shooter, you're not much of a threat as a passer. Westbrook, of course, an excellent passer. Talked about the double-doubles earlier. Over the course of his career, he's been phenomenal, though some turnovers have been costly, and now making more of them at a higher rate. Not shocking for an older player, but since the shot isn't falling, teams are laying off of him, and then there's no need for him to pass. They're playing the lanes, and that makes things more difficult. So, are there drawbacks to what Westbrook would bring to the Nuggets? Yes, there are. That is in no way avoidable. Reality is this is going to be tough for this to be an ideal fit, especially at this stage in his career. But there are things that he can do very well still. He attacks off the dribble, of which very few players do for the Nuggets. Obviously, Jamal Murray does as a starter from the backcourt. Christian Brown can. In fact, Christian Brown is at his best when that's the type of game he's playing. When Christian Brown is out there attacking the basket, he's better. But when they're off the floor, they need someone to do that. And Westbrook can still do that. So he still tilts the floor to his favor. And that opens up his passing game. There's also the advantage of the fact that this is a guy that is still an agitator. He gets under other players' skin. He understands how to bother them. He understands how to play in a manner that affects them. And that is maybe the most surprising part of Westbrook's maturation as a player. His defense, at least on ball, has gotten notably better. He's put in the work to do it. He's not obviously going to ever be confused for a defensive player of the year, but we know about the energy. We know about the athleticism. And now that he's been more effective in getting in front of his man, he can bring you something as well. So for the Nuggets, it's not as if this is a slam dunk. Now, given the fact that beggars can't be choosers, and when you have as little money under the cap as the Denver Nuggets have, you have to very seriously consider that. But it's a worthwhile risk. And presuming all this comes to pass, and there's no reason to think that it won't eventually, it's a gamble the Nuggets really have to make if they're going to prop open their championship window. You haven't been able to fix the big man issue. It sounds like, again, much like Fetch in Mean Girls, the Nuggets are going to try to make Zeke Naji happen. It hasn't happened yet. It's not going to happen, but you don't really have a choice. You're going to have to make Naji go out there and do it. Naji, by the way, is the 5th highest paid player on the Denver Nuggets roster this upcoming year. 5th, Zeke Naji. That's a problem. It's a mistake. It's a mistake that Calvin Booth made in adding to that role for Naji, getting in the new contract when it was under no circumstances warranted, and now they're stuck with it. Part of the reason they didn't want to go into the second apron is because you can't move Naji away unless you can combine some sort of salaries here and there to pick up a player. And the only way to possibly do that is to make sure you stay out of that apron. So all of these things come into play. For the Nuggets, it's the right move. It's a smart move if it comes to pass. But it's not a guarantee. It doesn't mean the Nuggets will be vastly better. It doesn't mean the Nuggets are championship contenders. But Westbrook would at least give you a secondary ball handler behind Jamal Murray that Reggie Jackson wasn't, and gives you at least a big enough name, a big enough target, a big enough player that his intensity might be able to make a change for the Denver Nuggets. And that's a good sign. So all of this seems to be trending in the right direction for the Nuggets. The loss to Holmes looms over everything, even though he has yet to play an NBA game. But there are things to like about the potential addition for Westbrook, even though it's not a guarantee. There are things to like about Trey Alexander. There are things to like about Julian Strawther. They need to get bigger. They don't really have a lot of options to do it. DeAndre Jordan isn't going to all of a sudden be able to turn back the clock, and I'm not convinced that Zeke Naji is going to work here in Denver if it worked in the NBA at all. But it's the right move for the Nuggets. It's a worthwhile gamble. And if it continues to happen, if everything continues along the track, it will make for an entertaining season at the very least, with 2 of the top 4 and soon 3 triple-double collectors in the history of the NBA. We'll have a chance to talk about that more, of course, as the offseason rolls along. But want to remind you before we get to the Denver Broncos that are you looking for the perfect place to work, play, exercise and socialize? Well, then look no further than the Denver Athletic Club. Right here in the heart of downtown Denver, as a DAC member, you'll enjoy top-notch amenities like a full fitness center, licensed childcare center, spa, massage, Pilates, a golf simulator, and more. But what truly sets the DAC apart, what's kept it in the heart of Denver for over a century, is its vibrant community. The member-owned club is all about you. It offers year-round social events, co-working, dining, and fun for the entire family. The DAC, the Denver Athletic Club, is truly a club for your whole life, not just to get fit. But for a limited time now, you can find out what the DAC is all about because new members pay $0 in initiation fees. That's right. You try it for no initiation fee whatsoever. You'll find out why it's been in the heart of Denver for more than a century. Visit the DAC and join it with no initiation fees today. We'll take a look at the Denver Broncos in a moment. Of course, the Broncos veterans will be reporting to Dove Valley later this week. Give me a second there. It's Monday, a little bit thirsty. Sandy's off, so you have to take a second and hydrate here. The Broncos situation in year 2 of Sean Payton's is very, very interesting. And it's interesting for a handful of reasons. Payton, I don't believe, was the right fit for this team necessarily. And I don't think Payton necessarily thought he was the right fit for this team necessarily. What Sean Payton wanted was to be the coach of the Dallas Cowboys. That made the most sense to him. It maybe made even the most sense to Cowboys fans. But say this about Jerry Jones. The man does not generally give up on things quickly, whether it's coaches, whether it's players, anything of the sort. We can ask Aniello Piro about that. He'll join us a little bit. Our resident Dallas Cowboys fan at Mile High Sports. He'll tell you the same thing about Dak Prescott, who certainly has the Cowboys over a barrel. But over at CBS, they had an opportunity to rank the head coaches around the league. And Sean Payton, who has won a Super Bowl, came in at a surprisingly low ranking, 18th, with the category accomplished with questions. And that's probably fair. Payton, in his last 4 years as a head coach, has had exactly one playoff win. In fact, interesting where he ranked, directly behind Mike McCarthy, who is ranked 17th, of Dallas, the man that Payton hoped to replace, behind DeMeco Ryans, who the Broncos hoped to hire instead of Sean Payton. He came in at 13. And not spraying myself on the shoulder while patting myself on the back, the man that I suggested in a previous radio life that should have been the Denver Broncos hire, Kevin O'Connell, hired by the Minnesota Vikings, listed as 12th overall. Now, is that entirely fair? No, it's not. McCarthy, Ryans, O'Connell, the accomplishments career-wise to Payton, totally separate. But Payton, who seems to be at least uncomfortable to this point in his career about a rebuild. On the other hand, given the fact his quarterback situation includes what he would refer to as, orphan dogs, seems to be embracing the reality of a rebuild with the Broncos.
It's kind of the orphan group. All of them they're all orphan dogs. They've come from somewhere, but they're doing good, and it's a good room.
It's an interesting way to put it. Obviously, Jared Stidham, kind of a journeyman backup. Zach Wilson, obviously a very high draft pick, didn't work out with the Jets. He's with the Broncos. Bo Nix is a first-round pick. I don't know if he's really an orphan dog per se, but I get the point. We've hopefully disabused you of the notion that there is a quarterback controversy in Denver because there is not. The Broncos are going with Bo Nix as long as Bo Nix is healthy. They drafted Bo Nix, hoping Bo Nix would be healthy and take the job. They went after J.J. McCarthy is a smokescreen. We told you that here on this program a month before the draft. That was never real. Told you that right here. While everyone else was messing with the idea, could they draft J.J. McCarthy? Told you right off the bat, no, they don't have any interest in J.J. McCarthy. That's not the kind of quarterback that works in Sean Payton's system. What he wanted is Bo Nix. And the only other quarterback that you could make the argument might work in a Sean Payton system in the draft was Caleb Williams. You weren't drafting first, so you weren't getting him. So Bo Nix was always the guy. Bo Nix is going to be the guy for the Broncos. And that means that the Broncos, who went 8-9 last year in Sean Payton's first year, are undergoing a full-fledged rebuild. That's new for Sean Payton teams. It's not something that he has traditionally wanted to go for. In fact, when he talked about coming to the Broncos, he talked in the offseason about how he would be pissed if they didn't make the playoffs. Well, they didn't. They were never going to. And there was only a bit of a mirage in the middle of the season that made you believe for a second that they might. But even by then, the Broncos had already pressured Russell Wilson to change his contract. They had already planned to move on. Payton never wanted Wilson. Wilson didn't work out with Hackett. Wilson didn't work out with Payton. Wilson was always on the way out. And so the Broncos weren't going anywhere. That makes this season particularly interesting because given the fact that Sean Payton doesn't really like rebuilds, but now doesn't have a choice, he's leaned all the way in. Look at the players that the Broncos have moved on from. Justin Simmons, Josie Jewell, Jerry Jeudy, Lloyd Cushenberry. That's for starters. Got something in trade for Jerry Jeudy. Everyone else, they just let him walk. That's because Sean Payton is all in on the rebuild. And though I do have questions about Payton's ability in today's NFL to continue to have success coaching the way he coached Drew Brees and the Saints in New Orleans, I don't have any doubt that this is the right choice. And I give Payton and the Denver Broncos a lot of credit for it. This team has been sputtering at best for now the majority of a decade. No team that has ever won a Super Bowl has ever had as many playoff-less seasons immediately following a Super Bowl win than the Denver Broncos. Now, if you're thinking, and fairly so, but Peyton Manning retired after the 2015 season. That's obviously changed things. It does. It does. John Elway retired, however, after the Broncos Super Bowl win as well, and they didn't have this bad a run. So this is a bad situation for the Broncos. And the only way to handle it is to, one, accept that it's a bad situation, and two, do something about it. And that can be pretty challenging. It can be painful for longtime Broncos fans who have been believing that the Broncos are just this close to getting back to the playoffs. They weren't. Been telling you ever since that it was a long road. The only chance they had was the 2016 season, the last time the Broncos won more games than they lost, when they went 9-7 under Trevor Siemian. They haven't had a winning season since. They're not going to have one this year. But that doesn't mean that they won't get better, even if they're not better on the wins and loss column. Because what the Broncos have to do now under Payton is decide what kind of team they want to be. A lot of these things are happening already. We know about the Bo Nix drafting. This is Bo Nix's team going forward, if he can hold it. Now, the truth of the matter is, if it's a disaster for some reason, I don't think Sean Payton will pull the plug after one season. But the Broncos over-under on wins in Vegas is 5.5. That's the third worst in football. If they pick, let's say, number 3, you're going to have some quarterbacks to look at. You may look at Carson Beck. You may look at Quinn Ewers at Texas. You may look at Shedeur Sanders at Colorado. One of those 3 guys could land right in your lap. Nix is an interesting selection, the most veteran collegiate quarterback in history. No one's ever started more games as a college quarterback than Bo Nix. He put up great numbers. And there is a lot of reason to believe that his game can translate to the NFL level and translate quickly. But if it doesn't work quick, would you be able, if you're the Broncos, to pass up on one of the star caliber quarterbacks that might be sitting right at your lap? I don't know. Nobody knows yet. The Broncos hope they don't have to find out because they don't want to have the third worst record in the league. And there's a chance that they won't. But the rebuild is fully underway. And perhaps the most important note of it happened officially today. The reports came out last week, but officially today, the Broncos announced that they had completed their new 4-year deal with Quinn Miners, their third-round selection out of Wisconsin Whitewater from a couple of years ago. Miners, now one of the very best guards in the league, and maybe best lineman in the league, seems to still have room in which to grow. He could have been named an All-Pro last year. He was that good, but he's playing on a bad team. That hurts. Miners is probably a top 5 guard in the league, and he's getting paid like it. But the odds are the Broncos aren't going to regret this contract, even as expensive as it is, because those positions are so hard to find. In the offensive line now, it used to be blindside tackle, or the other side, right? So left side or right side, depending on which your quarterback is. Now, tackles are tackles. It was all that long ago that you wouldn't pick a guard high. You certainly wouldn't pay a guard. Well, now you do. And Miners is in that list. The idea is to get good offensive linemen, get them paid, let them stay on the same line for a span of time, and build the synergy with their teammates. You can do that for the most part with the Broncos. They should have 4 of their 5 starters returning in Garrett Bowles, in Ben Powers, in Miners, and then in right tackle Mike McGlinchey. Cushenberry, as we pointed out, went to the Titans and via free agency, and we'll find out what the Broncos do at center. Sam Mustipher, veteran, and then Alex Forsythe, teammate 2 years ago with Bo Nix, and Luke Wattenberg apparently will compete for the role. Mustipher is the veteran. One would think has to have the leg up, in part because if the Broncos are going to do anything and make any noise this year, you're going to have to keep Nix upright. You're going to have to find a way to protect him. And for a Broncos offense that is woefully short of playmakers, to protect him, you're going to have to make absolutely certain that your line is doing the job. So Mustipher probably has the edge, but that will work itself out when the Broncos get into training camp soon enough, and then into the preseason and so on. But what you've seen under Sean Payton is very clear. There's an investment in the offensive line. No team last year spent more money on the offensive line than the Denver Broncos when they added Powers and McGlinchey. They spent the most in the league. Garrett Bowles now is one of the highest paid players on the team and has been for some time. Now Miners is up there. The Broncos pay their offensive linemen, and that's smart because there are really, in the end, in today's football, a couple different things you have to think about. The quarterback's the most important position in sports. We understand that. But that obviously means protecting him is equally important. Can't throw when he's on his back. Can't win when he's on the bench. Can't help you if he's hurt. These are the kind of things the Broncos need to invest in, and they have. They've also drafted heavily on pass rushers on the other side, and we'll get into them a little bit more as training camp rolls along. There are some things to be optimistic about when it comes to the Broncos pass rush, even though it's going to be a by-committee affair. But in Sean Payton's second year, putting him as 18th among coaches, I'll be honest, that feels a little low, especially since the Broncos at 8 and 9 probably overachieved a little bit. They won't get there this year, barring a lot of things strange. Not something strange, a lot of things strange. But I do think they're headed in the right direction. And I think when you're talking about what Sean Payton is doing, even the results may not come this year. This is the way to build success. You've got to build a roster around your quarterback. Identify your quarterback. They've done that. Protect the quarterback. They've done their best to do it. And now build a team around it to make sure that you play the way that you want to play. And Sean Payton is in the midst of doing that now. It does mean there's been a talent drain from the Broncos, and it is a drain. They have lost more talent than they have brought in. There are questions about the running back room. There are questions about the tight end room. There are questions about the wide receivers. Nix doesn't have, at least immediately and on paper, a lot of help. But I like what Sean Payton has done in the offseason. I like the direction the Broncos are taking, and I think it has a chance to succeed in the long term, not necessarily in the short term. And for Broncos fans, the big question will be, are you going to be okay with investing that kind of time and energy, knowing that the payoff won't be this year? And I'm curious about it. I really don't know how Broncos fans will feel. I think the Broncos fans in the second year, now that there's a rookie quarterback again, should it buy them a little bit of a honeymoon period? It should. Will it? I don't know. Because the Broncos haven't had a winning season since 2016. And we all know that that's too long. And in AFC West, where the Chiefs obviously run the entire league and look to be the first team to ever three-peat, and the Chargers expect to be resurgent with a healthier Justin Herbert and Jim Harbaugh as head coach, it's going to be difficult for the Broncos to make noise now. So investing for the future is the right play. And I think Sean Payton's doing it right. And I think the Broncos organization is doing it right. But it's certainly going to be hard for the Broncos to ask its fan base for even more patience. And that is exactly what they're going to have to do. But investing in your health isn't nearly as difficult to do. And there's an immediate payoff for you as well. And that's where I want to let you know about our new friends at Constitute Health. Constitute Health, the idea, of course, is to optimize everyone's own health, their own individual health. They're trying to empower patients on their own journey, complementing their existing healthcare, using relationships with compounding pharmacies in America, allowing them to ship directly to all patients nationwide. And then you avoid some of the costs of the inpatient visits, and you save time and money as well. Over at Constitute Health, what they're trying to do is you're trying to figure out how to optimize your health by making sure we know more about you. After you get a blood test and after you find out specifically about your particular needs, there are all sorts of ways that they can help you. Can they help you with testosterone? Sure. But they can work you with a hormone replacement, obviously with the semaglutide and GLP-1 therapies if you're dealing with weight gain that you want to find a way to get rid of. Peptides, NAD pluses, more. If you want to sleep better, if you'd like to have more energy, if you'd like to be more effective in every part of your life, this is what the folks at Constitute Health are trying to help you with. And they can do that in a very unique fashion. So give them a look, constitutehealth.com, mention Mile High Sports, mention MHS, and you get $50 off your initial blood work and your consultation. Or we've made it pretty easy right here to help people look into your health and wellness. So check the Constitute link over at milehighsports.com for $50 off your initial visit. Therapies help patients burn fat, assist with weight loss, optimize sleep and those sleep cycles, and enhance their cognitive and executive functions, as well as maybe retaining muscle mass and burning fat when you're working out. So whatever it is that you want to try to optimize in your health, Constitute Health can help you. Check them out at constitutehealth.com. The Colorado Rockies find themselves in an interesting spot. Not that they're good, they're not good, but things seem to be trending in the right direction. Joining us to talk about it is from Mile High Sports, our friend Aniello Piro, and the host of the Locked On Rockies postcast after every single Rockies game, Aniello Piro. Aniello, thank you very much for joining us. We have a little bit to recap, obviously. The Rockies win 2 out of 3 coming out of the All-Star break, but I want to go backwards a little bit and take a look at the draft, because possibly for the Colorado Rockies, they ended up with as blue chip a player as they have ever drafted. Yes, I know we're talking about a weekend in which Todd Helton made the Hall of Fame, in Charlie Condon. Condon, the 3rd overall pick in the draft, but widely considered to be the best player. Some signability concerns allowed Travis Bazzana, the second baseman out of Oregon State, to go to number 1. But Chase Burns, who was picked 2nd by the Reds, the right-handed pitcher, and Condon, who batted a ridiculous .433 in 60 games to lead all of college baseball, ended up with a $9.25 million signing bonus, breaking Paul Skeen's $9 million from last year. The Rockies getting their guy and spending money to get it done despite signability concerns. Who are these guys?
Yeah, it's definitely uncommon for the Rockies. And I guess the one good thing about being as bad as they've been for the last few years is you put yourself in a position to acquire this type of premium talent through the draft and whatnot. And I was talking with a couple of guys that I trust, that do some work in the minor leagues or cover the minor league teams. And I was asking about this kid, and they basically hit the nail on the head with everything you just said. You're talking about arguably the most talented player in the Major League Baseball draft, but just an absolutely obscene amount of raw power and potential. I mean, this kid is I don't know if you've seen any of the highlight reels. You can go to our Instagram at Mile High Sports. I posted a slide of some of his highlights. This dude is a mauler at the batter's box. I mean, he hits balls like an absolute laser off the bat. So I'm super excited to see what the future for Mr. Condon holds in Colorado. And yeah, I was a little taken aback that the Rockies, were shelling out those coins, for a guy who hasn't even played in the major leagues, and a guy that quite frankly was a little bit of a late bloomer at Georgia. Yep. His ascension as a prospect hasn't really taken place until the last couple of seasons. So we'll see what he can do, but he joins, guys like Drew Romo, guys like Zach Veen, among some other guys down there in the minor leagues that the Rockies are hoping are going to come to fruition and hopefully lead this team in the future next to guys like Ezequiel Tovar and Adiel Amador.
Yeah, when you look at the last 2 years at Georgia, you're talking about 37 home runs last year, 25 home runs the year prior, major power. And then this year, of course, the batting average that pointed out .433, his OPS in the 60-game season was 1.565. And that's what you get. Not only that kind of power, 78 ribbies in 60 games, but 57 walks to 41 Ks. We're talking about elite power and plate discipline. That might remind you of somebody we saw in Cooperstown yesterday.
Definitely a good point. And I know we'll get to Todd Helton here in a moment, but what's also interesting, and hold your breath, Rockies fans, the Major League Baseball comp that I'm seeing everybody throw out there is Chris Bryant, but prime Chris Bryant with the Chicago Cubs. I'm not talking about Rockies Chris Bryant, although I do think I read something. He went 5 for 5 yesterday down there in AAA. So
neat.
I'm not going to hold my breath on Chris Bryant showing up at the major league level, but when you're drafting top 5 like that, and look, the Rockies have had some swings and misses. I think about a guy like Riley Pint, who's floated in and around the major leagues. Right. Peter Lambert, I forget exactly where they drafted him, but I know he was a high draft pick as well. The pitchers haven't necessarily worked out for them, but the hitters, they've done a great job. I've made the comparison with Ezequiel Tovar that, the Rockies draft middle infielders like the Green Bay Packers draft and develop quarterbacks. It just seems like they're always able to get these guys, and you're hoping that Condon is going to be the next great guy, to help maul here at Coors Field. But I think the Todd Helton comparison is fair as well. Similar part of the country, down there in the South region where we know baseball is king, outside of football and whatnot. So I'm excited to see it though, man. But with Todd Helton getting the Hall of Fame yesterday, that was a very special moment as well. His speech was incredible.
Yeah, Condon is an interesting player because much like, Chris Bryant, you make the comparison, Chris Bryant was drafted at the age of 21 out of San Diego and played very, very well. And basically within 1 year, he was starting for the Cubs and becoming a major part of their organization. So it wouldn't shock me. Condon may take, a year and a half, but when you're talking about a team that doesn't have a lot of major offense and a guy that's had more than 700 career college at bats, the experience is there. There's only so much that you're going to be able to find out about Charlie Condon in the minor leagues for very, very long. And that part is pretty exciting as well, because while he does play third base for Georgia, he's also played first. He played right. You can obviously, in the majors, you can DH him. This is a guy that can hit. He's got a good arm. He's not a great glove man, but he's got a strong arm. And we know about the power. And if there's one thing you really want, power plays in Coors Field. And that leads us to this opening series in which the Rockies took 2 of 3 from the Giants. Ezequiel Tovar, in his last 3 games, he did not play in Sunday's late game, the 3-2 loss to the Giants. But Tovar, who was in a bad slump to tail off on the end of July, finished the last 3 games, the 2 against the Giants and the 1 against the Mets prior to the All-Star break. 4 home runs in 3 games. Tovar seems to have all of a sudden gotten it right.
Yeah, he's been back in the saddle for sure, and I believe he went 0 for 28 at one portion, leading up to the All-Star break. I believe it was 8 consecutive games without a base hit for Ezequiel Tovar. And look, that's going to happen. And I was listening to the radio broadcast over the weekend as they were talking about Brenton Doyle, who's also been on fire. But they talk about how the sophomore season is typically one of the harder years for any professional athlete to kind of acclimate to. And you saw Tovar hitting around 290, up until about July. So I felt like some regression was due for him. Didn't expect it to be that severe, but I think that's the mark of a good player is able to kind of ride that wave even when it's not going your way. And look, I'll put it this way. I don't have any concerns really long-term about Ezequiel Tovar. Obviously, you don't want to go 0 for 28 and go 8 consecutive games without a base hit and whatnot, but he hit an absolute moonshot to the concourse in left field on, I want to say, Saturday night, if memory serves me correct. The glove has been pretty solid for him. I say this on the Locked On Rockies postcast all the time. Ezequiel Tovar and Brenton Doyle. Those are the 2 guys. Brenton Doyle's 26. Tovar, I believe, is either 21 or 22. Those are 2 guys that you can legitimately look at and say, okay, you're our shortstop for the future. You're going to be one of our outfielders for the future. And I think you saw Tovar in a big way snap out of that slump. And the Rockies, how about them getting a series victory? I know it's against, the team that's barely above them in the standings, but nice to see Colorado take 2 or 3 from the Giants to get us started here out of the All-Star break.
Yeah, you take what you can get. And in case you were curious of what that Tovar bomb looked like, yeah, we have it from the Rockies.
This ball is launched to deep left. If it's fair, it's gone. It is a fair ball. Another 2-run home run for Ezequiel Tovar. His 4th in the last 3 ball games. And the Rockies take a 4-2 lead.
That went up on the concourse. 455 feet. And remember earlier in the game we were talking about that base hit was 110 miles an hour. This one was 109.1.
Tovar is a shortstop, and you're talking now about that batting average being back up to 278, the same as Brenton Doyle. Strikeouts are still a problem, 14 walks to 122 Ks. But Aniello, you're talking about a guy that if he plays Gold Glove caliber defense at short, which he has, hits roughly 280 something and has 25 homer power, and it could be even better than that. That's a major, major weapon. I mean, you're getting big time numbers and production from a youthful guy in that spot. So for Tovar, obviously all systems go, but we talk about Doyle, also 16 home runs, tied with Tovar for the team lead, all past Ryan McMahon, the team's only all-star. He's now 4th on the team in home runs because Michael Toglia has to be one of the stranger seasons I've seen in a while. Toglia now tied for the team lead with 16 home runs. Toglia only has 183 at-bats. That is less than half of Tovar's, and he's hitting 197. So what do you make of Tolia's season right now?
It's weird, right? Because when I do the Locked On Rockies postcast and I see that Toglia has a home run, like obviously he's going to be a natural talking point throughout the course of the show. But it's basically home run or bust with him. You point to the 197 batting average. He actually has been pretty solid on defense as well. And Toglia has been one of those guys, much like Sam Hilliard, who I know has kind of been up and down.
Right.
It's been 3 or 4 years of kind of big leagues, AAA for a guy like Michael Toglia. But, when you're as discombobulated, as the Rockies are, you're going to have some opportunities, to play. Jacob Stallings now getting some regular time with Elias Diaz being a little bit hurt. Toglia with the Chris Bryant injury. We saw Ade Amador get up there for a minute after the injury to Brendan Rodgers as well. And so, it's weird because you love the fact that he's hitting the ball out of the ballpark, but you don't love the fact that that's pretty much all he does on offense. So it's kind of a boom or bust approach, but you'll take the runs any way you can get him with the Rockies. I believe even yesterday's game, the one that they lost, every single run in that game except for one was scored via the long ball, and the only run that wasn't scored was on a pass ball from catcher Jacob Stallings. But, you'd like to see the average get up there a little bit, but this is kind of the day and age of baseball where you take the solo shot over the single. So I guess, by that mold, Michael Toglia is doing a good job, but we'll see what the rest of the season holds. But, doing a decent job of kind of plugging himself into this lineup and making a name for himself. So, tip of the cap to Toglia. I don't think he'll be here or be a major impact player long-term, but he's definitely making the most out of his at-bats.
Well, I go back to I have to go back to the 80s and go to Rob Deere, for example. If you remember a guy like Rob Deere, who regularly had, in the 20s and 30s home runs, led the league in strikeouts 4 different times, and on a good year, hit over 210 maybe. And it's not as if he didn't have some value as a player. But the problem is it makes it hard to string together big innings when you have a guy that is kind of boom or bust. And if you really want to get serious as a franchise, you have to be able to, at times, string together big innings. And maybe that'll get better as he gets older. But at the very least, with the DH now being in play in the National League, the idea that perhaps you can have a pinch hitter with power, and I get it, Tilly is way too young to talk about this kind of scenario, but a la Jason Giambi during his days with the Rockies, where you have, you need a home run off the bench. Okay, well, you got a guy he's kind of that 3 true outcomes guy. Maybe there's value there, but it is obviously, it has to get better for the most part for Tilly to be able to really hold down that position long term. But obviously, when you got that kind of power, there is some value in the way you play. Now the Rockies have an interesting matchup. Of course, they are going to be home, although it will not feel like it, because starting tonight, the Boston Red Sox come to town for 3 games. So all of the Red Sox fans, I'm sure, will show up en masse. Is this a particularly important matchup for the Rockies to try to make a statement here? Does it matter all that much? Because at the same time, we understand that they're not going anywhere. But it's not as if the Red Sox are setting the world on fire. They've very kind of snuck their way into in the periphery of the race here and now gotten themselves quite a bit over 500. Is it important for the Rockies to do what they did a little while ago when Cleveland came to town and had an opportunity to play them and played very, very well against Cleveland and then against Philadelphia? Is this one of these series where if they're actually going to try to build something going forward, they have to make a good showing?
I think it's a confidence builder, and I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but the Rockies actually this season have a pretty good record against teams with winning records.
They have a terrible record against teams with losing records. It's abysmal.
Yeah, it doesn't make much sense. Here's one thing I will throw out there for anyone that likes to play the numbers as well. The Red Sox played the Dodgers last night on Sunday Night Baseball, so they probably got into town this morning probably as the sun was coming up or close to it. So just keep that in mind for tonight's matchup in particular. But, that's my major theme when I talk about it on the postcast as well is, look, you're not making the playoffs. That's a pipe dream. But can you be competitive? Because it felt like the month of July, like you were just losing in embarrassing fashion. And it's just so demoralizing for the fan base. And I'm sure for the players as well. I've been in that clubhouse a handful of times this season when, you get to the 3rd or the 4th inning and you're already buried by 5 or 6 runs, or your starting pitcher can't get out of the 3rd inning or whatever it might be. And so, look, like I said, we know that this Rockies team isn't going anywhere this season, but the way that I look at it is strong showings against decent teams gives you confidence for what you're building. And I've made this comparison time and time again, whether I've been doing shows solo or I've been a guest on programs like this. Last season for the Rockies was a complete and total wash. I don't feel that way about this season because I'm seeing Ezequiel Tovar. I'm seeing Brenton Doyle continue along. I'm seeing a guy like Aniello Piro come up and take some good at-bats, right? I'm seeing Kyle Freeland looking
right.
Coming back from the injury list. Herman Marquez looked all right. Cal Quantrill has been good. Jake Cave has stepped up. So it feels like there's a little bit more depth with this season. And my big thing is, look, I think the Rockies are one of the 3 worst teams in Major League Baseball. It's the Rockies, the White Sox, and the Marlins that come to mind. But the Rockies are more talented, in my opinion, than their record alludes to sometimes. So the way that I look at this Red Sox series is it's not about, kind of checking your height with other teams in Major League Baseball, but it's showing that you can play competitive baseball and play that a 500 ball, because it has been so demoralizing. The fans have had little to nothing to really root for over the last 3 to 4 seasons. But I do believe some of this youth movement is starting to come to fruition. So I think it's a little bit of a gut check for the Rockies in this series. I do.
Well, and after this 3-game series with the Red Sox, they get 10 straight on the road. So obviously it does not get easier. You want to bank a couple wins when you can, because obviously we know what the road does to the Colorado Rockies. The problem is the Red Sox are actually better on the road, 29-20, than they are at home, where they're just barely around 500. So obviously that will be a challenge as well. Make sure after all of those Rockies games, you check out Aniello Piro on the Colorado Rockies Locked on Rockies postcast. Does a terrific job with all of that and keeping you up to date with the live reactions. So make sure you give Aniello a follow there and check out everything you can with the Rockies as it happens, because big series tonight, obviously always a bit of a measuring stick, as you pointed out. And then you have that 10-game road trip looming. Appreciate all the insight. Thanks, Aniello.
Absolutely, Sean. Looking forward to everything we got coming on through the pipes with training camp as well. So we'll have some fun with it, and let's see what the Rocks can do tonight and throughout this series.
That's right. The Rockies only had to keep you entertained till the football season, right? That's what they usually say. Of course, then the Broncos had to keep you entertained, I guess, till Nuggets Navs season. We'll see if that changes this fall as well. Appreciate it, AP.
Have a good one, guys.
All right, thanks. We'll talk more about Todd Helton, of course, but I want to remind you now that it is still that beautiful part of the summer, it's time to get out and play some golf. And the city of Denver has the perfect golf pass for you, whether you're just getting started or you've played for decades. You have a couple different ways to tackle it. The practice and play pass is for those new to the game, and then you can practice what you've learned and then transition it onto the golf course. The Learn and Play Pass 1.0 is geared toward adult beginners. So maybe you haven't had a chance to play before, but you have friends that have played, you have coworkers that played. You wanted to give it a try. It's people who've never held a club or players looking to advance their game. The Learn and Play Pass 1.0 is perfect for you. If you've been playing for a while, the Learn and Play Pass 2.0 is designed to be flexible for intermediate players looking to improve and then fine-tune their game. But if you're just looking to have some fun, just golf, just play golf at all, well, the Friends and Family Pass lets you play mini golf or hit the driving range. And every time you do, you can bring up to 3 guests with you at the same time. So you can have a mini golf party with the kids, with the friends, whatever it might be. You can just go to the range and work on your skills that way, or just get a feel for the game. You can bring friends with you as well. With 8 unique courses and opportunities for all skill levels, Denver Golf is perfect for anyone. So learn more about everything Denver Golf has to offer by visiting cityofdenvergolf.com. Come home to play. Denver Golf is your neighborhood course. Well, one of the biggest names in Colorado Rockies history had his moment, and justifiably so. Todd Helton, part of the 2024 Hall of Fame class for the National Baseball Hall of Fame. Helton, third baseman Adrian Beltre, catcher Joe Mauer, and one time, very briefly, and not a very good stint, manager Jim Leland, of course, primarily with the Tigers and the Marlins, all part of the Hall of Fame. Todd Helton, not a guy that loves to talk a lot about himself, not a secret there, but he had the rare moment to hear from number 17 yesterday.
The rewards that have come to me from baseball are beyond the wildest dreams of a young rookie coming out of the University of Tennessee. I know I'm a lucky man. All I can say is thank you to everyone whose support helped me get here, and thank you for this tremendous honor.
Wonderful moment for Todd Helton. Obviously, the funny thing is this probably took longer than it could have been, because 17 years of phenomenal statistics were generated primarily at Coors Field, of course, on the road as well, in which Helton's numbers were also exemplary. But the incredible line, 316 career batting average. When you look at the slash line, the 316 line, You go up for 414 when you're talking about on base. When you look slugging at 539 and then an ops of 953. Since 1930, here's players who had better slash lines than that. So 316 batting average, 414 on base, 539 slugging, 953 OPS. There's two. Ted Williams and Stan Musial. Those are guys that didn't have to wait very long to make it into the Hall of Fame. That's it. You know what Ted Williams didn't do that Todd Helton did? Win 3 Gold Glove awards. Now, I'm not saying Helton's better than Ted Williams, but you're talking about the very lofty company he keeps. The only hitter in history to ever string together back-to-back seasons with 100 extra base hits. Of course, a tremendous doubles hitter. An extraordinary player, top to bottom. Should have probably been a borderline first ballot Hall of Famer, but Larry Walker needed to probably get in first and break the seal for the Colorado Rockies. Walker made it, of course, in 2020, and then it still took a while for people to figure out that Todd Helton deserved to be there. Here's how he batted away from Coors Field. How about this? Looking at the 10-year peak, folks, The Athletic took it from 1998 2007. Away from Coors. 296 career batting average, 395 on-base percentage, 504 slugging, 899 ops with more walks than strikeouts. That's it. And if you want to go through the history of that, only 2 players had ever hit that well on the road in the last 50 years, Chipper Jones and Lance Berkman. That's it. Helton, this is a no-brainer, and he deserved to be there. The problem, of course, was the fact that it was the Rockies. I talked about this before, though. We'd seen the path. When these players reach a certain stage of votes, and then the vote jumps, you know they're about to make the leap. And Helton, of course, was kind of stalled at 2020. Then Walker got in, and then went from 16.5% to 72%, and then found a way to jump. So makes that 75% for election this year and deserves to be in. So very, very exciting for Todd Helton. Just an extraordinary career when you look at what Helton put together over the course of his career. Batting champion back in 2000 with a 372 batting average, was making a run at 400 as late as just about anybody but Tony Gwynn and George Brett did. And when you want to get the idea of how good he is historically among his position, you can look at stats like wins above replacement. Helton's career wins above replacement is 61.8. That is 15th all time among first basemen, period. End of story. Among all first basemen who have ever played, only 15 had more. And when you take a look at those numbers, they jump out of the screen at you. Lou Gehrig is number 1, then Albert Pujols, Jimmy Fox, Cap Anson, Roger Connor, Jeff Bagwell, Dan Brothers, Frank Thomas, Johnny Mize, Jim Thome. That's the top 10. Only one of those isn't in the Hall of Fame, and that's Pujols because he hasn't been retired long enough. 11 is Miguel Cabrera. Same situation. 12 is Joey Votto. Same situation. 13 is Rafael Palmeiro, of course, steroid tinted. Number 14, Eddie McCovey. Number 15, Todd Helton, both Hall of Famers. Helton's as good a first baseman who has played when you take the glove into account, when you take the batting average into account, especially nowadays. When you look at players, we just went over with the Rockies with Ezekiel Tovar and with Brenton Doyle and with Ryan McMahon and the strikeouts that they've had. Todd Helton, over the course of his career, had 369 home runs. He had 1,335 walks and 1,175 strikeouts. The man had power and had more career walks than Ks. That doesn't even exist in baseball anymore. That's for the greats. And it's one of the reasons that I talked about Charlie Condon, the Rockies' 3rd overall pick in the draft, a guy that had more career walks than strikeouts. Now, by the time you get to the majors, things are different, obviously. But the batting eye makes a difference. And it's one of the reasons that Helton is in the Hall of Fame. Those walks bring up all your other numbers. When they know you have plate discipline, pitchers have to throw you strikes. And if you can punish them for it, then you find yourself in a great position. These are all the things that Todd Helton could always do. I remember at the time after he was drafted out of Tennessee, and I was out at spring training, and people were enjoying watching the Rockies, still very new at that time, and watching then Andres Galarraga, terrifically entertaining and very, very impressive first baseman as well. Major power, great glove, wonderful personality. I remember actually talking to some people as the Rockies were going away, and people were asking, oh, wow, who should I get an autograph from? And I pointed to Todd Helton. I'm like, you'll want him. He'll be the Rockies starting first baseman next year. I had people stare at me like I was crazy because Andres Galarraga was still the guy. How could you possibly move away from Andres Galarraga? Well, we know how. Because Todd Helton was ready. You grabbed a talented, experienced college player, you let him do his thing, and then you let him play. Perhaps for the Rockies, Condon might be that kind of guy as well. The world is different in baseball now. The Michael Tolias and the Ezequiel Tovars, who strike out at nearly 10-to-1 ratios, are still somehow considered to be acceptable, given the fact that they don't really allow you to string together big innings. Now, Tovar's younger. I'm not making light of him. He could get better. Tolia could too. But when you're talking about the true greats, you have to be able to take pitches. You have to be able to get on base, even when you're not getting hits. The Rockies are missing that. They have to find a way to get better at it if they're going to move forward. They do have hope. Tovar is good. Doyle is good. Nolan Jones is good. He's having an awful year and he's had injuries. I get it, but he's good. Ryan McMahon is good. Brendan Rodgers, when he's healthy, good. There are talented players for the Rockies. Zach Veen, talented minor leaguer, could be coming. Drew Romo, a catcher, same thing. If you had an outfield of Jones and Doyle and Veen and an infield of Romo and McMahon and Tovar and Rodgers, what do you need? You need a first baseman. Could it be Tolia? I suppose. Could Chris Bryant get healthy? I suppose. Maybe in a year or so, it's Condon. And now all of a sudden, you've got something. You've got power. You've got some speed. You've even got batting average. But what you need is patience at the plate. Until the Rockies have it, they're not going anywhere. And Todd Helton's example might be one to follow. Of course, when you're talking about someone who's a big deal in these parts, not only is Todd Helton the face most recognizable with the Rockies, you could argue that Larry Walker is the most talented player to ever play for the Rockies, and I wouldn't necessarily debate you on that. But Todd Helton is a close number 2 and played his entire career with the organization, saying winning in the World Series with the Rockies would have meant more than winning it anywhere else. So he gets to be the face of the Rockies. But do you think he wasn't a big deal? Let's not forget, too. He was the quarterback at the University of Tennessee after Heath Schuler and prior to Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning backed up Todd Helton his first year. That's the last time Peyton Manning backed up anybody. Now, Helton knew that wasn't going to last, but Helton and Manning have remained very close friends. And when Peyton Manning was deciding where to continue his career, John Elway certainly did a great job selling him for the Broncos. But Peyton Manning called his old friend, Todd Helton, who never left Colorado, as a lot of people who move here never do. Guess where Peyton Manning still lives? Right here in Colorado. And he probably doesn't come here if his good buddy, Todd Helton, didn't show him that the way of life here in the Centennial State was something that was going to work for him. So not only does Todd Helton get to be the face of the Rockies, he's indirectly also partially responsible for landing Peyton Manning and getting the Broncos their Super Bowl championship, one that they will be trying to get back on the right track over the remainder of this next season. Training camp gets underway next week in earnest. The veterans will report later this week, and we're excited to bring you all of that as it comes along. We're going to step aside for today. Thanks for everyone who popped in and listened to all of it. Thanks to Danny Bailey making all of this work. Everything you see, everything you hear, it's all Danny. We can't do it without Danny at any point in time. Sandy Clough off today, so thanks for bearing with me as I'm going to go ahead and take you from beginning to end, and along with the help from Aniello Piro, of course, from the Locked On Rockies postcast. Make sure you check him out over at Mile High Sports, and with all of that, great to talk to Aniello as well. But most of all, very fun to get to talk to you. Hey, it might be summer, but it's starting to feel like fall. Football season feels like it's getting going in earnest this week. Excited to talk about it more with you as the week goes along. So I'm going to step aside. I'll be back at it tomorrow. For Danny Bailey, I'm Sean Drotar. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Any part of the program you liked, click that like and subscribe down there, and you'll get all of the latest, and it'll bring you everything in advance that we'll be talking about for the day. So we're going to step aside and be back tomorrow, but you don't have to go anywhere. Why should you? You're in the best spot there is. Live, local, independent, been around for 25 years. We know what we're doing. This is Mile High Sports.